Hello, welcome to today's lesson. Logos appeals to ways of reasoning. What is logos? Logos is an appeal to an audience's sense of reasoning. It's not always formal logic, because sometimes when you think about the word reason, you might think, what is the fact behind this? It's not always facts. It's sometimes appealing to culture or logic, so ways of reasoning shared by people. For example, if I said, get me that Kleenex over there, I might not be pointing to an actual Kleenex. It could just be a derivative brand of Kleenex. But you'd understand what I mean by Kleenex. It's also syllogism. Syllogism is a type of formal logical argument in which there's a major premise and minor premise. So, think about this. Socrates is a man. All men are mortals. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. That is an example of syllogism. How do you find logos in pieces of writings? You can find logos in the overall structure arrangement, smaller arguments and logical moves at the paragraph or section level, local structures within sentences. What does this mean? Overall, looking at the effective piece of expression or text, you can find logos working together on a major level. You can even go micro by looking at each paragraph, or even better, looking at the smaller arguments within each paragraph. So at transitions working well, you can also go really micro into the local structures, the sentences themselves, how well are they put together. In looking at the overall arrangement, you can look at parallel structures, juxtapositions, analogy, compare and contrast, narrative, cause and effect, problem solution. Parallel structures are things that look alike. For example, I am a woman. I am a girl. The eyes are parallel. Sometimes having parallel structures resembles facts, and it's also something that reinforces fact. Juxtapositions, putting things next to each other. Sometimes putting like objects next to each other also reinforces fact. Analogy is also a kind of logical overall arrangement. Overall, is this piece of text an analogy? Is it reasonable? There's also compare and contrast, which is pretty clear. I'm comparing and contrasting this thing, so I can point out to you that what I'm saying is in fact true. Narratives, stories can also add to logos. A story being told can add to the fact being given at the end. Cause and effect. Because of this thing, there is this effect. Therefore, I'm correct. Problem solution. There's a problem, here's a solution. All these things lead to the overall arrangement and are ways to find logos in a whole or as a whole in a piece of text. In terms of smaller arguments, we have deduction, induction, lists and repetitions, arguing by example, cause and effect, and consequences. Cause and effect is pretty clear by now. Arguing by example is also quite clear. If you use an example, you can also make things look reasonable. Then we have consequences, which is pretty close to cause and effect. Because of this thing, we have consequences such as this. Then we have lists and repetition. Having a list and repetition also leads to more fact, because people saying the same thing over and over might assume that it is fact. Then we have deduction and induction. Induction is, let me give you an example. 2 years ago, it rained every day in March. Last year, it rained every day in March. So therefore, this year, it will rain every day in March. It's very possible that it might not rain every day in March this year, but it seems very likely, right? Whereas with deduction, we have, let me give you an example. Say there's a shelf. It has 3 layers. On the first layer, there are 5 jars. Second, 2 jars. Last, no jars. I can say, guaranteed, that there are only 7 jars in that shelf. So the difference between deduction and induction is that deduction is a guaranteed truth or fact at the end, whereas induction is something that's more likely to happen. In taking a look at the local usage, we can take a look at the diction and word choice. How do the word choice and diction add to logos? Is it a formal type of language? Thinking about the transitions, are the transitions very well transitioned? Meaning, do they make sense? And do the titles indicate what this is going to be about? All these things sometimes add to reason. Using the term logos, you can use it as a noun or adjective or verb. An example of a noun would be a rhetor appeals to logos by. An example of an adjective would be a rhetor's logical appeal An example of an adverb would be an argument works logically. Rhetorical analysis is separating the parts. Thinking about pathos, ethos, and logos, they all work together. Logos leads into pathos, pathos leads into logos. So if you start by framing a certain type of thinking with an appeal to logos, it can also have an emotional effect on the audience. Think about if you told a story, a narrative, it can make the audience cry, right? So logos leads into pathos. If you have pathos leading to logos, if you have the audience feeling a certain type of way, you can form a new foundation of how they think with appeal to logos. Special thanks to Michael Farris, and also the Introduction to College Rhetoric and Inquiry textbook in which much of the information was gotten. Thank you for watching.